Landorus-T has always been one of the most popular Pokemon in OverUsed, until this generation. The behemoth that was number 1 in usage, both in Generation 7 and in Generation 8, has since fallen from greatness. In fact, my personal prediction on the focus of this video will be why it will fall into the underused tier, the second tier below OU, underused, for the remainder of this generation. With the release of DLC 2 in the coming days on Pokemon Showdown and already on the handheld game, many people have seen a lot of new threats. Not only are there ground types that compete with Landorus, but there are also some new matchups which might be handing Landorus some L's. Those Pokemon are few and far between in prior generations, perhaps. In fact, Landorus is able to wall a lot of Pokemon in prior generations. For example, last generation, when it was number 1 in usage, it was able to wall things like Tapu Koko lacking hidden power, or Zeraora, a very common Pokemon, and it was able to provide valuable things like Stealth Rock, which it still has, or Defog and Knockoff, which it now lacks. These tools have eaten away at Landorus' usage. However, it still has a lot going for it. For example, as you can see the set on my screen right now, it's clearly a very common user of Calm Mind and Terra Blast, no doubt about it. But also, it can still use Stealth Rock, chip away at things with Rocky Helmet, use your turn, and boast its impressive 145 base attack to dish out some good damage. The thing is that, with power creep and increased distribution of other ground types, such as Ting Lu, Gliscor, Great Tusk, just to name a few previously in the metagame, or newcomers like Swampert and Excadrill, or even some less common Pokemon like Ursaluna, Garchomp, and Clodsire, you see why Landorus-T might no longer be a shoo-in to fit on your team. In prior generations, yes, there were some ground types, in fact quite a few, but none of them were able to quite compare to Landorus' utility. With the drop in utility due to moveset limitations, and the increase in utility of other Pokemon, you can see why it might fall somewhat in usage. Great Tusk, while it doesn't have Defog, has Rapid Spin. Gliscor is able to live forever because of its deal with the devil, and Pokemon like Ting Lu similarly have great longevity and also access to other hazards like Spikes, phasing moves like Whirlwind, even unique moves like Ruination. Landorus-T unfortunately went from one of the most toolsy Pokemon to a bit less so, to the point that it's definitely very limited in what archetype it could fit on, mainly being used on bulky offense as it lacks longevity and it doesn't really have things that can be used to uniquely benefit your team. It does still have Intimidate, it does still have U-Turn, and those are big selling points for a Pokemon with its offensive profile and good typing, don't get me wrong, but even things like Terra don't necessarily benefit it, as it's not quite as likely to be healthy later on in games to be able to use a Terra defensively, and offensively speaking, it's not necessarily in need of a big Terra either, whereas the Pokemon around it you might see using Terra more. In addition to that, I think that there are also some new Pokemon that are going to be released with DLC 2. Shout out, by the way, to Roy and his whole team, Anubis, Matt, Capodix, Mako, SLP32, for their awesome work. I've been using this sheet just to keep up with some DLC stuff. Anyway, there are also some new Pokemon that I don't know are necessarily going to do well yet against it. Or sorry, I don't know Landorus can do particularly well against. I apologize. First and foremost, Hydrapple is going to be able to basically shrug off everything it does but U-Turn, and even that it will be able to regenerate off the health of, while being able to decimate it with 120 base special attack and a number of special attacks. Finally, old enemy, nemesis if you will, Skarmory, is also coming back, which stonewalls Landorus-T for the most part, and we'll also see an assortment of other Pokemon such as Kyurem, which is going to shred it with ice moves, or even potentially, the power creep in these Pokemon, although they're mostly Earthquake weak, but Terrapagos is going to be starting in OU, and as you see, it gets pretty bulky pretty quickly, and it'll hit from pretty hard from a special end, so I see it doing pretty well. Even things like Deoxys defense and Deoxys speed might be able to 1v1 it. So all in all, there are a lot of things going against it, and there are a lot of barriers to usage. Back in its glory days, Landorus saw, as you see, 40% usage in Generation 7 and 41% usage in Generation 8, and at times it even went over 50%, which is crazy, and not necessarily something we'd see that much nowadays for Landorus. Maybe King Gambit or Great Tusk, but Landorus' days in prime are long over. So the big question now is going to be, will Landorus go from seeing north of 40% to south of 4% and falling into the underused tier? And don't get me wrong, I'm sure Landorus-T would still be viable in that it would have a niche, there would be a reason to use it. It'll see some usage. It'll be above 0%. But will it get above that 4.6% threshold? Will it see enough usage to stay overused? And my personal guess is no. And I think that the day Landorus-T falls, you're going to be seeing all of these memes on Twitter, all of these posts on Smogon, all of these people discussing it on Pokemon Showdown about how it might be one of the biggest falls from greatness in Pokemon Showdown history and Smogon's steering history. And to me, I think this is interesting. All in all, I do feel as if Landorus has a ton of unique qualities still. Intimidate, great. Ground typing, of course, you need a ground on every team for Volt Switch immunity and also just the general utility of the typing. Has access to Stealth Rocks, sure. Earthquake based 145 attacker, speaking my language, not to mention, it can get the ground up on some other Pokemon that are ground types. For example, it has Grass Knot for Great Tusk, Ursaluna, Swampert, and it can even run a U-turn to be slower to get initiative against something like a Swords Dance Gliscor, so you could bring out a faster Ice or Water type. But, unfortunately, that's really where all she wrote. It really struggles against the abundance of strong special attackers, the general longevity of balanced teams right now, and the slew of power creep Pokemon that are able to muscle through it, such as Ogerpon Wellspring, and Ice Spinner Great Tusk, the right Terrakin Gambit, and then obviously all the special attackers out there, the Manaphy's, Dragapults, Greninjas of the world, not to mention Enamorus if it lacks Stone Edge or Rock Slide, which it doesn't run very often. Enamorus just comes in and clicks Moonblast against it, and it's a very dangerous Pokemon to let in. And this is just talking about in the prior metagame. The new metagame, with DLC 2 coming out again on PS any day now, it's going to be even scarier. And given that, I do predict that Landorus-T will drop to underused. But I do have a question for you guys. What other OU staples do you guys see falling? We've already seen things like Rotom Wash fall. Tyranitar, in fact, falling all the way to RU. But Landorus-T, it could be next. We could see Toxapex fall next. We've also seen Pokemon like Garchomp and Garganacl fall down. They're currently back, but who knows? So I'm curious what shakeups you think will happen. My big guess and my focus in this video is Landorus-T. Thank you guys for watching. I wanted to keep this pretty short form. I thought it'd be a fun topic to discuss. I do plan on trying to get some content out at least until baseball season starts in April. I feel like with my platform growing on Twitter, I've been posting a lot of memes and competitive updates, and OU definitely, kind of erupting this generation. It's a good time to seize the momentum and hope give you guys some perspective on things. So if you have anything you want to see me discuss in the channel, let me know down below as well. Can't promise anything, maybe a video a week, but that's about it. But in the meantime, guys, thank you so much. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below what you think about Landorus. Will it stay OU? Will it hang on by a thread? Will it be UU? And in UU, will it be broken? Will we finally have a Landorus ban, even if it's in a lower metagame? Will the Landorus ban crave of yesteryear, if you will, come back? Or will we finally hit a point where it just stays in UU and ends up a UU Pokemon? Personally, I think it actually could stay UU just with the level of power creep. And I know that'd be insane if you hear me saying that like a year or 2 years ago, but look where we are now. Alright guys, really appreciate you listening. Just getting back in the swing of things, so pardon me if my cadence is off, but you all have a good day. Alright, later.